What if the entire system of firearm permits collapsed overnight? No waiting months, no paying fees, no begging a bureaucrat for permission to exercise a right. That's the shockwave tearing through America. In a unanimous 9-0 ruling, the Supreme Court declared the government can't lock the Second Amendment behind a permit system. The very foundation of carry law, gone in one decision. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. The Department of Justice, the same agency that spent years fighting to limit gun rights, didn't stand in the way. They backed it. And more than 20 states, including some you'd never expect, jumped on board too. This isn't just another ruling, it's a legal earthquake, a signal that the age of forced permits may be ending. So what happens next? That's the part that gun owners and gun control states are panicking over right now. Because the fallout isn't just about law books, it's about your wallet, your carry rights, and the future of the Second Amendment itself. And to understand how explosive this is, you've got to look at the barrier that just got smashed. This isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning, so stick with me. For over a century, states built walls around your right to carry. Paperwork, background checks, endless delays, all designed to remind you freedom only came after permission. But that wall just cracked wide open. The court didn't mince words. Rights don't begin when a government stamp says so. They begin with the Constitution, and if a state forces you to buy, beg, or wait to use them, that's not safety, that's control. Look at New York. 18 months of waiting, $400 in fees, approval rates as low as 0.3%. That wasn't a right, it was a lottery with your freedom as the prize. Now, the court bulldozed the system. Every delay, every tax, every subjective maybe from a bureaucrat exposed as unconstitutional. The message was clear. The right to carry isn't granted by permission slips, it's guaranteed. Which raises the next question. What about the millions of Americans who already jumped through those hoops? People who paid fees, waited months, carried that little card like it meant something. Here's the twist. Those permits are now worthless. 2.8 million Americans just had the ground ripped out from under them. In the eyes of the court, the man who waited 18 months and shelled out $400 now stands on the same footing as his neighbor who never applied. In California, more than 400,000 people just discovered the laminated IDs in their wallet carries no more weight than a grocery receipt. That's over $50 million in fees, vaporized. And yet some states are still trying to cash renewal checks on paper that's constitutionally dead. The message is brutal but clear. If you thought buying permission would protect you, that safety net has been shredded. And the real shock isn't who lost power, it's who switched sides. Because the DOJ has always been Washington's muscle. For years, if a gun rights case made it to court, the DOJ was swinging against it. They defended permits, backed restrictions, spent millions to keep the system alive. But this time, they didn't just step aside, they switched sides. Inside their filings, the truth spilled out. The DOJ admitted what gun owners have said all along. Permits aren't about safety, they're about control. The data was damning. Wealthy zip codes saw approval rates above 80%, while poor neighborhoods with the same applications dropped below 15%. Same forms, same requirements, two very different outcomes. A two-tiered system dressed up as public safety. Now the same department that once fought to keep the wall standing is calling it unconstitutional. Even more shocking, they want criminal charges against state officials who enforce permits after this ruling. Imagine the enforcer becoming the executioner. And they didn't stand alone. 25 states filed briefs demanding permits be scrapped. Texas and Florida were obvious, but Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan? Battlegrounds now siding with carry rights. Together, this coalition represents 60% of the US population and over 300 electoral votes. No fringe power, political muscle big enough to tilt the map. If they were celebrating, gun control states were in panic. California's strict May issue regime? Dead. Within hours, lawsuits targeted permits and training mandates. New York, already rocked by Bruen, lost its last leg. Illinois now faces a flood of fresh lawsuits. Some states are still cashing renewal fees, charging citizens for cards worth less than a bus ticket. Sheriffs in rural counties are refusing checks. Prosecutors are dropping cases overnight. The legal battlefield has shifted, and blue states are scrambling. But if you're wondering who else took a hit, follow the money, because a billion-dollar empire just went up in smoke. Behind every application, every renewal, every mandatory class, there was an industry. States collected fees. Instructors sold certifications. IDs piled up year after year. But the court didn't just shatter the legal foundation, it smashed the cash register too. Overnight revenues worth hundreds of millions dried up. Instructors faced cancellations. State databases lost their justification. Training schools that thrived on required courses now facing bankruptcy. This was never about safety. It was about control and profit. Both are evaporating. And the real storm hit when the badge and the gavel stopped agreeing. Across the country, sheriffs, police chiefs, and prosecutors were thrown into limbo. Some still demanded permits, sparking clashes with attorney generals. Local prosecutors began dropping charges, fearing lawsuits. Sheriffs in Arizona, Georgia, and Idaho declared, "We will not enforce permit checks." That's confusion, but the crackdown came next. Federal marshals have now been authorized to walk into state offices and shut down permit operations. Employees who keep collecting fees or processing paperwork face $10,000 fines every single day they defy the ruling. Over 3,000 state workers are staring at sanctions. Some could even face prosecution. Picture it: a sheriff still enforcing old rules, only to have a federal marshal arrive to shut it down on the spot. That's not theory, that's the enforcement plan already in motion. And if fines weren't shocking enough, the court dropped a twist nobody expected: Payback. The ruling didn't just erase permits, it ordered states to compensate the very people they forced through the system. A $2.3 billion fund has been carved out of permit revenue collected over 2 decades, and it's been funneled back to gun owners. Payments ranging from $500 for delays all the way to $50,000 for citizens flat out denied. Even legal fees, lost wages, and the emotional toll of being forced to wait in line for your rights are on the table. And you don't even have to apply. The government already has the records and will issue payments automatically. For years, Americans paid to be restricted. Now the system is paying them back with interest. So if permits are gone and states are on the hook for billions, what's the next domino to fall? Because this ruling didn't just validate constitutional carry in a few places, it triggered it everywhere. All 50 states are now being pulled into the same standard. Age limits, training mandates, even location restrictions that once carved out exceptions are collapsing under the weight of this decision. What started as a red state experiment has now become the law of the land. The ripple effect is brutal for state budgets too. Hundreds of millions once flowing in through fees and mandatory classes, gone. Training schools that relied on government mandates, facing bankruptcy. In one sweep, what was once a patchwork of laws has been replaced with something new. Constitutional carry recognized coast to coast. And here's the part no one expected. It may not stop with guns. If the government can't make you pay, wait, or beg to exercise the Second Amendment, how can it justify doing the same for free speech, protests, or religion? Legal experts warn that thousands of permits tied to fundamental rights could crumble under this precedent. Cities that demand approval for rallies, churches forced to get permission before opening their doors, even journalists shackled with licensing, all of it now standing on shaky ground. For the first time in living memory, the burden flips. Citizens don't prove they deserve rights. The government must prove why it can take them away. That shift doesn't just rewrite gun laws, it shakes the balance of freedom in America. This moment didn't appear out of nowhere. It's the latest link in a chain tightening for years. Heller in 2008, the Second Amendment protects an individual right. McDonald in 2010, that right applies to states. Bruen in 2022, every gun law must pass the test of text, history, and tradition. And now, the court just applied that test to permits. The message is clear. Rights don't wait on a clerk's approval. They don't shrink under politics. They stand, unshaken, by the highest court in the land. Gun control advocates once believed they could outlast the court. This ruling flipped that script. The court isn't catching up, it's leading. So where does it all go from here? Blue states are scrambling to carve out sensitive places where carry is banned, hoping to stretch the definition until it covers nearly everything. Others are rushing to rewrite training requirements as backdoor permits. But every one of those tricks is now a lawsuit waiting to happen, and with this precedent, the courts are likely to swat them down first. Meanwhile, federal pressure is ramping up. Non-compliant states risk losing hundreds of millions in law enforcement funding. Governors and attorney generals could even face civil rights prosecutions for dragging their feet. So brace yourself. The lawsuits will be endless, the loopholes creative, the resistance fierce. But the foundation has already shifted. Permits are gone, and the ripple effect is tearing through the map of America. Nobody thought it would collapse this fast, but here we are. Permits gutted, billions gone, the DOJ flipped, states scrambling to adapt. For decades, gun owners were told to play by the rules, to pay, to wait. And in one stroke, the court shredded that deal. But don't think for a second this is over. Blue states are already plotting new ways to box gun owners in. Lawsuits are brewing. Federal enforcement is looming. And the next battles, over magazines, accessories, even sensitive places, are already knocking on the court's door. So here's the question. Will your state comply or fight until the last lawsuit? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe now, because this fight is only heating up. The next chapter of America's gun rights is being written right now.